Welcome to this Satisfactory tutorial where I will explain how to set up a functional basic oil refinery setup, dealing with all of the sub-processes that you need to keep in mind for making this setup work as streamlined as possible before you have fluid packaging and or other ways to deal with the oil byproducts. First of all, you need to locate some oil node patches. I recommend using the Satisfactory Calculator Interactive Map or a similar map for that if you do not know where the oil patches can be found. In this tutorial I am using 4 pure patches, so keep in mind that you need to calculate the numbers appropriately for your crude oil output based on the purity of the patches that you use. The part of the map where I have my base, Rocky Desert, is my definite favorite part of the world to start in, both because it has so many tasty pure nodes of various resources in the area, but it is also one of the most aesthetically pleasing areas of the world for me. Now, by the time that you're working with basic oil, you should already have gotten a basic understanding of how the pipe system and fluid dynamics in the game works. But if not, I recommend in all modesty that you watch my tutorial on pipes and fluid dynamics before you continue watching this tutorial. Pipes and fluid dynamics are an integral part of oil and oil refining, so you're going to have to work extensively with them with this setup. In the setup that I have here, I do not have to use any pumps as I'm not exceeding 10 meters of height in part of the pipelines. But if you do, just a quick reminder that you need to use pumps for every 20 meters of height that you want to transport the fluids through the pipes. Also, remember that a pipe has a capacity of 300 cubic meters of fluid. I decided that I wanted to make 60 rubber, which I can show you over here, 20 parts per minute per refinery, and 60 plastic, shown over here, 20 parts per minute, in my setup. And that equals 1 full Mark 1 belt of each product. A quick glance of the refinery recipes shows that a refinery working at 100% clock speed produces 20 of each of these parts per minute, but in addition, those refineries also produce heavy oil residue. Respectively, the plastic refineries will produce 20 cubic meters of heavy oil residue per minute each, while the rubber refineries over here will produce 10 cubic meters of heavy oil residue per minute each. This means that with a setup of 6 refineries, 3 on each side here, that are making rubber and plastic, you need to have a way to deal with 90 cubic meters of heavy oil residue per minute. Since oil pumps use 40 megawatts of power each and refineries use 50 megawatts of power each, I noticed that instead of running out into the world to set up an additional chain of coal power generators, I could set up some refineries to convert this heavy oil residue into petroleum coke. Petroleum coke can be used as a fuel source in a coal generator instead of coal, and thus this setup is also self-powered, which is an additional benefit of this setup. However, while 1 unit of coal is worth 300 megajoule of energy, 1 unit of petroleum coke is worth 180 megajoule of energy. So, when you set up your coal generators, you need to factor in that difference in your calculations. A coal generator burning coal will consume 1 coal every 4 seconds, or 15 coal per minute, whereas a coal generator burning petroleum coke will consume 1 petroleum coke every 2.4 seconds, or 25 petroleum coke per minute. I won't go into the detailed explanation of the mathematics involved in this here, as that would be too involuted, and unless you are particularly interested in the mathematics, in which case you're probably already quite capable and aware of the formulas yourself anyways, all you really need to remember is that when you have coal generators burning petroleum coke, you need 25 petroleum coke and 45 cubic meters of water per minute for each generator, and that each generator will generate 75 megawatts of power. Now, with 90 cubic meters of heavy oil residue being produced each minute, I set up these 5 refineries that are refining this heavy oil residue into petroleum coke. One of these refineries at 100% clock speed will make 60 petroleum coke from 20 heavy oil residue, or cubic meters of heavy oil residue per minute. Thus, this fifth refinery is clocked at 50%, which means that my 5 refineries here are making 270 petroleum coke per minute, which is exactly enough to fill one Mark III belt to capacity. So, all that remained was then setting up the coal generators that are going to burn the petroleum coke and convert it into power for my power grid. Doing some not so very quick calculations, I eventually landed on the number 10.8, which means that I have 11 coal generators here, where one of them is running at 80% clock speed. That also means that I needed to have 2 separate water networks, one running 3 extractors and one running 2 extractors. Keep in mind that instead of running 3 water extractors, you can overclock one of these so that you have just 2 of them. You might possibly even overclock one of them to produce enough. I haven't tested that. But for the sake of this tutorial, I am avoiding overclocking and I am just using underclocking, because overclocking would require that you have power shards available, which means that you would have had to go collect power slugs and you would have to unlock the appropriate technologies in the MAM. Admittedly, this also does apply to underclocking, but at least you don't need power shards at hand to underclock a building. Finally, keep in mind that if one of the parts of this process runs at a slower speed or stops, it will slow down or stop the other parts of the process too. For example, if you're not using enough power from your power grid for the coal generators to burn the 270 petroleum coke that you're producing, your production of plastic and rubber will be slower. Or if you have containers like I have here that are filled with plastic and rubber, the coal generators will shut down because you're no longer producing heavy oil residue in these refineries, and thus you are not producing any petroleum coke in those refineries, and that means that this is an unreliable source of power. The main purpose of these coal generators is to ensure that this process is a self-powered one, and you should not rely upon this as a reliable source of power into your main power network unless you actually have a stable production line that is already using both 60 plastic and 60 rubber per minute in your factory. I hope that this tutorial helped you with your first adventure into the new basic oil production chains of Satisfactory after Update 3 was launched. Adjust the numbers of pumps and refineries and of course coal generators accordingly to your tastes if you wish to produce more or less plastic and or rubber per minute. And as always, keep in mind that Satisfactory, like most production line games, is a game where you should never be afraid to tear down something that you've built and rebuild it. Creating a factory that you feel is perfect to your specific style of building is not something you should expect to happen in one single game session. When you make a mistake, learn from it and learn from others, watch tutorials and let's plays, and with each new playthrough you will see that your building style and that your factory efficiency will improve every time that you build a new factory. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you all next time.